my name is Russell Mullen. I'm here at the Mother Earth News Fair.
Hi, I'm Uncle Mud. Welcome to the Mother Earth News Fair with us. We're here to play in the mud and work with sand and clay and straw to show how you can build buildings out of it.
Cool. And if you guys have any questions, feel free, type them in the comments bar, and we'll do our best to answer them. So, yeah, let's get started. I'm ready to get my hands dirty.
Yeah. So back before our ancestors had Home Depot or any place like the dump trucks to bring anything from elsewhere, they were building houses out of the mud under their feet. And that's something I really like to do. So I like to build pizza ovens and rocket mass heaters and houses out of sand and clay and straw. So this is mud that we dug out of my yard, a mixture of sand and clay, and I've added we've added some straw to it to give it some structural strength. So this is what's called a cob. Cob is an Old English word for lump, and that lump is really strong once we add some straw fiber to it. And if I add another lump to it and I keep adding more lumps to it, I can make a lump big enough to live in. And that's a cob house.
So is the cob the actual mud part, or is it with the straw? What's the difference between the two?
So these are both cobs because they're both lumps. So this is a lump of mud, and this is a lump of mud with straw, which is actually stronger, and I can sculpt with it and build a house out of it.
Awesome.
So this I will actually use as a plaster because I've got some little tiny fibers like this recycled newspaper used as a fiber to make this stronger. And this one is made with straw to make it much stronger, more difficult to pull apart, and you can actually build a building with it. And I'm going to show a little bit how to do that.
You talked a little bit about cellulose. Now, you could actually get cellulose from cow manure, right?
Shredded newspaper or cow poo, or this is just that bales of insulation that I go to the hardware store and buy a big bale of it, and I throw it in the mixer with the mud, and it helps make it stronger. But there's so many ways to do this with recycled materials and with the mud under our feet that it just turns into a lot of fun.
Cool. All right, so what are we going to do here with this pallet?
So if I wanted to have a little more insulation, and I wanted to build a building out of mud, but I want it to be a lot quicker, because sculpting a building out of mud takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of digging. But if I want something that's quicker, I'll take and I'll soak, I'll just basically dip some straw in muddy water and clayey water, and when it comes out of that clayey water and dries, there's this little film of mud left on it, so it's very difficult to start it on fire, and bugs don't like it and mice don't like it, so it becomes a much better insulation than just straw, because straw catches on fire real easily and it'll mold easily, but when I add the clay to it, it becomes super straw, and that it makes an excellent building material. And as you can see, I've got a pallet here that I've been stuffing straw clay into, and it just stuffs in, and the clay helps it stick together, and it's really quick to stuff in. And you want to grab some of that, you can stuff it right in.
Yeah, I would love to do that. So you just go in here on the back side?
Stuff it right in, yep.
All right. Well, that's really easy.
Exactly, and it goes up really quick. I build saunas out of this, or little cottages, where I'll just make a circle out of these. I'll make them, take 2 pallets high, and I'll go and make a circle like maybe 10 feet in diameter, and then stand them up and screw them together, and leave a space for a door. And now I've got a little sauna or a little storage shed. Put a roof on it, and I can do that in a weekend as opposed to a month to build a cob building the same. And then it's a little bit of straw and some clay and pallets that you can often find for free or for a few dollars a piece.
Oh yeah, I see them on Craigslist all the time, for sure.
Exactly.
And what is the consistency of the mud that you're dipping these in? Is it pretty watery when you
dip it in?
Yeah,
it's like a vinaigrette dressing, or maybe a pancake batter. Somewhere in there.
I'll never look at vinaigrette dressing the same way.
Never look at vinaigrette dressing the same, yes. It'll just be tasty, so much more tasty. Now that you think of mud, every time you think of it.
All right.
So now this is getting stuffed full.
And how much do you want to pack this in here? Do you want to leave it pretty
loose? You can
loose?
pack it completely. I mean, you can pack it really nicely. and then if we had it maybe a little soupier, we would leave it a little looser.
I see.
Because it would dry and harden, and and then when it's hard, it helps make these pallets a lot stiffer and makes the wall a lot stronger.
Okay.
But it also gives us a surface that we can plaster over. So we've got these like grooves in the walls between the boards, and we can come in with some plaster, and we can plaster over that, plaster over our mud and our straw, plaster over our board.
And
there you go.
This doesn't have the straw in it, so you're actually just smearing it on there, right?
Smearing it over the boards, over the hole.
Wow.
And maybe I'll make it like an inch thick.
Okay. And is there a technique, say, like if you're plastering, to make sure that it adheres well to the rest of the plaster?
if I get the boards and the rest of the straw a little bit wet, it'll stick better.
Okay.
But in this case, we're just showing how to do it. So this will dry nice and hard, and I might come back with a smooth plaster and finish it up later.
Okay.
But then I'll have and I do that inside and out, and that'll protect that straw and give us a durable building made out of pallets and mud and straw.
And what would you say the consistency of this is like? I'm thinking like a really thick brownie batter.
That's like a brownie batter, yeah. Yeah, or if I add the straw to it, you notice that it's the same material, but it gets a lot thicker when I add the straw to it.
Oh yeah.
So that so this is what I would use if I wanted to sculpt a building just out of mud.
Okay.
So the other thing I can do if I want some better insulation than these pallets would let me have, I can double or triple up the pallets if they're cheap, and then stuff straw in all three of them. With this big space and stuff straw in. I have a friend who's done that up in North Dakota for houses for people to live in instead of the trailers that they live in, maybe on some of the reservations up there. So if I take this, I want to show you what else I can do with this mud. This same plaster. I built this last building I've been building in Cleveland is actually a straw bale schoolhouse for a farm school just outside of Cleveland. It's Kelly's Working Well Farm in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, and we've been building a little school building, about 800 square feet, for their school there as a place to get out of the cold, because it's mostly an outdoor school. But in the winter, when it gets cold, we want to be able to go inside. So we've actually got these straw bale walls we've put up, and we smear this same mixture of a sandy clay on the straw bales, and when it dries, it's a nice durable plaster. It'll harden up, and then I'll put a smooth coat over the top of that, and that gives us a lot more insulation than that little pallet will. So it's easier to keep that building warm.
Okay, and would you happen to know like the ballpark R values that you find?
The R value of this would be about R40, which is about almost 4 times the real R value of your standard wall of your standard house.
Really?
Yeah. So it's a very good insulation. It doesn't cost very much. These bales are maybe $5 a piece. Stack them up between some poles the roof is sitting on, and now you've got insulation, a well-insulated building. And we've been using the mud from the property, the subsoil, to make a plaster to protect that bale, so that bale wasn't going to get wet in the rain, that bale isn't going to catch fire easily. The idea is just to use the mud and the straw to give us a natural building.
Cool. And is this the best side to plaster onto? Does it matter if it's this side or this side of the straw bale, or is it pretty much gonna be the same?
That straw bale will be plastered on either that side or that side, depending on which way you want to put those threads. This is actually as insulative because all of the fibers are going the same way. It's actually as insulative across the fibers in the short direction as it is along the fibers in the long direction, so you get more space in the building.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
so
really
this
good to
is
know.
actually a cob that we did yesterday that's dried now. Feel how hard that is. Try pulling that apart.
You're making me look bad.
Well, yeah, this
is.
You got a little crack in it.
Keep going. Okay.
Okay, so this is just dried sandy clay.
That was
with
really
straw.
hard.
And it's very durable. And the nicest thing about it is somebody breaks it. Say somebody backs in, throws a hammer at the side of my building. I can take that crumbly mud, I can soak it in some water, mush it back together, and smear it back on the wall.
Oh wow.
Yes. So that's the ultimate in recycling. Yes. So I can recycle my whole building like that.
Wow. Yeah, that didn't take anything at all. That's great.
No. And any of the extras, stuff that I didn't use, I'm gonna just drop it in the water, and then I have recycled mud.
Yeah, you can't do that with drywall.
Can't do that with drywall. Can't do that with cement. Can't do that with vinyl siding. But this gives me stuff I can use over and over again.
Great. And what is and have we had any questions? Remember? Yeah. Let's hear some questions.
Sure. Dawn McLaughlin from Florida is wondering how does cob hold up there, like in that sort of climate? Is there are there concerns about that?
So, Don, the first cob building I ever came across was one built by Christina Ott, the barefoot builder in Pensacola. She built a little tiny pottery shed in her parents' backyard, and when the hurricane came through in 2001, it washed away her whole neighborhood except for her little cob shed. So she was really excited, and there's even one of those big live oaks came down on top of it and smashed in the roof a little bit. Didn't affect the walls, and she was really proud of that. It wiped out most of the rest of the neighborhood. So it works there too if you can find clay. There's some areas in Florida where there's just no clay to be had, and if that's the case, you'll use something like earth bags, where you take old rice bags and fill them full of sand.
Awesome. Do you have to worry about mold with this sort of building material?
When I plaster, I'll generally add a little bit of borax to the mix that inhibits mold, and then it's going to tend to breathe well, so that's going to inhibit the mold. So it's not going to happen like drywall. Sometimes you'll get mold, black mold on it, and that'll make you really sick. That doesn't tend to happen if you've got a good dry plaster on a breathing wall.
Very good. Yeah, that's all the main questions we've got for now.
And so I know, say you're in a place that doesn't have much clay. Where are some of the places that you might be able to find clay? I know that perhaps quarries, there are a lot of quarries all over the place. Is that a possibility? Or
out in Joshua Tree, California, we were able to find clay in the middle of the desert because in the 1950s somebody had actually brought clay out there and dug a lake and lined it with clay, and then there was an earthquake and a fault shift, and the lake all drained, leaving the clay and the people going out of business because their community doesn't have a lake anymore. But they left all this clay, and we harvested it and built cob things out there. So you can find it pretty much anywhere. We find it in sandy banks of rivers, or we'll watch for somebody digging a foundation, and they have to haul that dirt away, and we say, oh hey, dump it here rather than dumping it over there, and they just bring it to us.
And how do you know, say if you're harvesting clay off of your own property or from a neighbor's property or from one of these projects going on, how do you know if what you're getting is good to work with? How can you tell the sand and the clay ratio, and what is the good ratio?
The way you tell is to play with it.
Okay.
So if I took and made a little snake out of this, and this has got this little snake here, if it breaks when I hold it like that, then it means it's got too much sand in it.
Oh.
And now his doesn't have any straw in it, so his is the right one to look at. But because the straw is providing reinforcement, if I mush it up like that and I put it on my hand and it sticks to my hand, then there's too much clay. So that's just about right with this sandy clay soil that we've got. And we actually went to a quarry and said, give us sandy clay soil, so we wouldn't have to mix sand and clay to get what we want. And by doing that, we get compactable fill for like $5 a ton, because that's their waste product when they wash gravel. So love using waste products, love using junk like pallets that nobody wants anymore. And straw is actually a waste product. This was from a wheat field, and they just took the heads of the wheat off of it, and they and harvested that, and then they chop down the straw and bale it and sell it as like for horse stables and so forth. And we take it and mix it with mud and make houses out of it.
And maybe we can do a quick reintroduction. We've been going for a little bit, so just for you folks that are tuning in, we're at the Mother Earth News Fair. We're live, and my name's Russell Mullen, and I'm here with clay expert
Uncle Mud.
Uncle Mud. So we've been over here playing in the dirt. So we're learning how to build some things. And again, if you guys have any questions, please type them in the comments box. And if you don't have a question, maybe just give a shout out of where you're calling in from. If you're in another state or in another country, let us know. We're here in Topeka, Kansas. So if you're in Topeka, Kansas, you should be here.
And the weather is beautiful. This is great for late October, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's beautiful outside.
I do have a question. How do you mix this? Now, this over here on the pallets is a thinner mixture, obviously. Do you use different methods for mixing that as opposed to the clay you'd use for this straw bale?
So our ancestors mixed this clay with their feet and their hands, and using oxen to to mush it all together. I like using a tractor or a skid loader or a big mortar mixer, or I've even used a silage mixer, to make 7 tons at a time. It's
wow.
You can use all sorts of a rototiller will do it nicely. It'll chop that straw up, so it'll so it makes a little bit different product. But basically, whatever mechanical means you can use to mix up the sandy clay and then apply it to the straw is going to work great.
And so, say if you're wanting to build a home or some other small structure, what's your preferred method for that? Do you just stack the hay bales on, kind of like the Nebraska method of building, or do you like to do a stick frame, and why? Like, what are the different
So I actually prefer child labor.
Okay.
Get a bunch of kids together and tell them you're going to play in the mud, and suddenly a lot of work gets done.
Yeah,
And,
I'd be in.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And kids of all ages. You know, it's amazing how much of a kid you can find in a 60-year-old that you're introducing to mud. So we'll build building the Nebraska method was to use these like they were big bricks and stack them alternately on top of each other, and then plaster over them. That's what they did when they got here and found that there were no trees and not even the sod could be cut and stacked up because it just fell apart. They just took that 6-8 foot tall grass and cut it and baled it and stacked it up and made houses out of it. And there's a couple of those still around out to the west of us here. And but we generally will build like a pole frame, and so we have a nice shade and keep the rain off of us while we're building. Build this pole frame, and then we'll stuff the bales in between the posts and then plaster over it. It makes good insulation between those posts, and also when code officials look at this, they say, "Oh, well, I can see the posts. It must be strong." Even though you could actually build a strong house using that Nebraska method.
Good. Melanie from Northern Vermont has a good question. She's wondering if you have a time of year that you would recommend for making mud walls, and how long does it take for them to cure usually?
So I would recommend not this time of year, because we're right at the edge of where it might freeze any night, and if you get a hard freeze, that's going to actually break the that water inside of the mud is going to freeze and break the mud, and it's all going to like crumble into dust. So the sooner in the year you get started, the more it's going to dry out, the more you can have everything done before the weather gets bad. So in Vermont, my building buddies in Vermont, New Frameworks, Ace and Deva Recusen there, and Ben Falk and all those guys, they'll start as early as April, late March, and they'll go, and right about now they're going to be super busy trying to button that building up, but they'll have finished those bale walls a long time ago.
Very good. And Maria has a question about interior floors. What sort of method do you use for that?
So interior floors, I would make a cob mix, much like this, and just smack it down and spread it out, and then we'd actually put a couple of boards in it to be able to pull another board across level to make it even, and then and let it sit and settle and dry. And when it's almost dry, we'll take a trowel and come over it and like kind of polish it. And but we wait till it's like leather hard to come back and polish it. But it'll be about that thick when we're finally done. Sometimes you'll make that cob floor as a rough floor in one level that's most of that thickness, and you'll come back with just a little tiny bit to polish it off and finish it off. And it's really a great floor to walk on. It feels like walking on leather, especially if you get it with a like you put those pipes in it with hot water in them. So you're walking on warm earth that you've been oiled, and it just feels you could dance.
Yeah.
It feels great.
I've had the chance to actually walk on a floor just like what Uncle Mud is describing, and it is heaven. You won't ever want to walk in a building like that
it's like
with your shoes on.
It's like a little bouncy, isn't it? It's like a little trampoline bouncing.
It feels incredible. And the radiant heating is a really good point. That's really awesome.
Yes, if your feet are warm, the rest of you is going to think you're warm, even if it's not as warm. So you get that floor warm, and you're just like, oh, I don't have to do anything today.
Yeah. And so with the oiling, what kind of oil do you recommend for that?
So I would use 10W40. No, I'm just kidding. The oil is usually like linseed oil or hemp oil, something that will sink in and then set up and be kind of hard and durable.
Okay.
It's going to turn that mud surface into something that will repel water, and unless you're wearing like stiletto heels, it'll handle the normal wear and tear pretty well.
Okay. And speaking of hemp, this brings to mind something else that I've seen before, and that's Hemp Crete. And I was wondering if you had any opinions on Hemp Crete or could draw any parallels.
Hemp Crete uses hemp plant crunched up and mixed in with lime to make a cement that sets up. It actually cures. Okay. And as opposed to what we're dealing with, which dries. Okay. So it's actually more durable, and it's a good mixture of insulation and thermal mass to store heat for release later. Except that right now hemp is very expensive because for some reason the government has decided that we don't want to grow hemp here, and we've finally just got some states that are allowing the growing of hemp, and so there's not very much of it being grown here. So bringing a truckload of it over from Canada is an expensive proposition. It's great stuff, but it's still too expensive to use, especially when I can do much the same thing with mud and straw. I see. Wherever I am.
Yeah. So it may still be some years off.
It'll be some years, but you'll see more of it. Okay. You'll see more of it because it's just starting to crack that egg.
Cool. Good. Well, Magnus wants to know if you use a regular straw or is it treated in some way?
The straw I use is not treated in any way that I know of before it gets to me. It can be rice straw, it can be oat straw, it can be I've seen people use hemp straws. Again, that's very expensive. It can be rye straw, it can be wheat straw. It's just whatever is produced around you is the best thing to use. As more local we can get with our building materials, the less of an environmental footprint there is from using them.
Definitely. Okay, and then Christopher has a good question. Let's see, do you have any tips for roof overhang that'll keep the water off of the walls on the outside?
So when we like to say that a natural building needs good boots and a good hat. And if we bring the foundation up maybe a foot 18 inches so that water running down by side of the building doesn't wash away our mud, and if we put an overhang on the building to keep the rain from falling directly on the wall, then maybe like a 2-foot overhang. I've built buildings with like a 4-foot overhang, and you can like put your wheelbarrow out there and stuff. It's kind of nice to have that overhang for outdoor storage. But if I were to have at least a 2-foot overhang, I appreciate that, because if I have any less than that, the rain tends to wash the mud off the wall, and you have to replaster it more. If you live in Amarillo, Texas, or someplace like that where rain only goes horizontal, then your overhangs aren't going to help you much, and you need to put some sort of thing on the outside of the mud to protect it. Maybe a lime plaster that breathes like a whitewash, or maybe like Terracoat is a spray that you can spray on that soaks in and then keeps the water from washing away the mud, or linseed oil. But I don't want to use too much of that because I want the wall to breathe gently and let the moisture pass through it.
Very good. And Mary wants to know, so what happens if the rain does wash it away?
So
Just put it right back on?
the thing I like most about mud building is that if there's something that happens like that it cracks. So say there's a crack in the side of your mud building, you can actually get it wet and smooth it, and the crack goes away, which you can't do with like a cement stucco or a vinyl siding. You got to break in it, you've got to break until you replace it. So the mud is actually very easy to repair, and that includes if it gets washed away a little bit. As long as it hasn't washed away and exposed the straw bale underneath or caused something to start rotting, you just take some more of this and you just smooth it on there and with some water and replaster. That maybe you need to do that once every 10 years, maybe every 5 years if you got a lot of rain. But it's not much of a maintenance, but it does need to be done.
Sure, yeah. And Alan wants to know how long one of these buildings might last.
So the oldest buildings in the world are almost all made out of mud. So you get out into the Fertile Crescent, or you get to Taos, New Mexico, where they say the Pueblo is 10,000 years old. There's 7-story skyscrapers in Yemen made out of mud that people are still living in. This is a very durable overall, mostly because it's easy to repair. Mm-hmm. You get something that is hard to repair, and after a while people say, oh, I'm not going to bother, let's just put something else there. But a mud building that's easy to repair, they say, well, why should I tear it down? I just need to smear a little more mud on it.
Yeah. Okay, and let's see, April is in Canada, and she wonders if this might be a good option there. I know they get a lot of snow up there.
In Canada, there's a lot of straw bale building because this is a very good insulation for the money. Almost like an R factor of 40 to get between 35 and 40 for that thick straw bale wall. And if you're in the Toronto area, Chris Magwood has a building school there that teaches you how to build as a commercial builder using straw bale walls, and it's a great place to check out straw bale. It insulates very well. It takes almost nothing to heat or cool a house that has that much insulation. So straw bale is a lot more earth friendly as an insulation than say foam that has a lot of off-gassing and a lot of chemicals that are produced in the production of the foam.
Good. Do you have a book or a website that people could check out?
So if you visit me on Facebook, look up Uncle Mud on Facebook, and you can ask questions there, and I can refer you to books that other friends have done. I spend a lot more time building than I do writing, but there's a lot of really good books. The Hand Sculpted House is an excellent book on cob building by Yanto Evans and Michael Smith, or The Cobber's Companion by Becky B. And then there's some great straw bale books by Chris Magwood or by Kathy. I'll think of her last name in a minute. But there's a lot of books out there. If you have a question on a particular one, I can refer you.
Very good. Maybe we could introduce ourselves again for these folks.
Yeah, for anyone just tuning in, I'm Russell Mullen. I'm with Mother Earth News, and I'm here with
Uncle Mud,
and we're just playing in the mud. So
what are you working on here again? For those who just tuned in.
Well, basically, yeah, you can take it away.
So we have been building a straw clay pallet wall. We take pallets and stuff it full of clay, straw that's been dipped in clay.
So if you can see kind of the texture of this, it's just straw that's been dipped in really pretty thin mixture of clay. And then we've just been stuffing it in here. A pallet, as you can see, if you come over here, you can see both sides. There's 2 sides of slats in there, and you just stuff it in there.
And then we take some wet mud and we smear it over those cracks and over the boards, and we plaster this whole outside of it, front and back, and then we have a really durable wall with some insulation in it that didn't cost hardly anything to make. And very quick.
What kind of structures do you recommend for building with pallets like this?
So I've built saunas, I've built little cottages, I have built some fun little playhouses. There's all sorts of great stuff. You can use your imagination.
Okay. And as a person that's interested in actually building a home out of straw bales and mud in the future, I was kind of curious if I were to like dig up something, earth, how would I check to see if it's what kind of mixture it is? Like we have a dirt pile over here, like lucky enough, that's kind of been dug up by these tractors.
Sponsor, a tractor.
Yeah.
There happened to be an indigenous piece of machinery here. This is great.
Yep.
Yes. Well, this soil that was dug up here, we want to see whether this is good for building with. So what we're going to do is we're going to get it wet. We're going to take some pieces of it and just throw it in here. Now this could be anything. This soil could be anything. It could be topsoil that would be great for a garden, but lousy to try to build a house out of because it will end up composting itself to death. Or it could be silt from a river bottom that won't hold together. Any of those things could be here, but I'm going to soak this in water and see if I can see what I'm dealing with.
And I've heard of people taking like soil samples and putting them in a mason jar and shaking them up in water and then letting it settle. Is that and you'll kind of see like how will you see that settle?
That's a good basic test where the sand will settle to the bottom the quickest, and then there'll with the rocks in it, and then the silt and the clay will just gradually settle down there. And the stuff that takes the longest is the smallest particles, and if they stay suspended, well, those particles aren't very good for building. But so this feels like it's got a lot of clay in it, and that's what we wanted to see, is to have some clay in it, and you can feel the grit, that there is some sand in there.
Yeah, I can
and
really feel
so we'd have to let it soak for a while to be able to tell. There is some root in there, which means that there's some organic matter that the whatever plant that was looking for.
And you don't want that.
You don't want that. So if you can dig down deeper, now remember our ancestors built with whatever they could find below their feet, and some of those buildings are still standing, 1,000 years later. So so you don't have to be all that picky, but we want to just test and see, because if we can find some clay, and then maybe we find that this is almost all clay, we would like break it up and crunch it up, and then we soak it and add some sand to it.
Okay.
And that would make it stronger. Or if it didn't feel like it was sticking together very well, because maybe it was mostly sand, well, we would add some wet clay to it and mix it all with our feet or our hands or whatever. We'd mix that all together to make something that stuck better.
All right.
Yes.
And if you were to use sand, you wouldn't want to use playground sand. You'd want to use builder sand.
So
right?
playground sand, if you look at it really close, it's like little tiny marbles, little tiny bowling balls, and those don't tend to stick together very well. Not as well as a sharp sand that's more blocky and stacks up more like Legos.
All right, we have.
Look, we have somebody come and pick up.
Oh no!
See, this is so much easier than using a shovel.
Yeah.
But it's a bit louder.
All right. What do we have?
Okay, one more quick question.
Okay.
Let's see. Michelle wants to know what kind of roof you typically use. Do you have a favorite type of roof?
Yes, I do have a favorite type of roof. It's called a living roof. I like to put the boards up there that I'm going to see as my ceiling, and then I'll put some insulation above that, like maybe some reused foam insulation, or even just cardboard will work. And then I put some rubber membrane over the top of that, like a pond liner, and then I'll put compost on there and grow flowers on the roof, and or maybe ferns if I'm in the woods. But I'll use compost and let things grow on that roof, and I think it's very pretty to have a living roof. And it also tends to be cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter.
Very good.
All right. Well, I hope that we answered a lot of questions. We have some people digging over here, so I think that
now that it's loud, maybe we'll go do something else.
Maybe we'll go do something else. So, hey, it's a beautiful day outside. Don't sit in front of your computer all day. If you got some mud, you got some water, and some straw, go out and try and build something. So
and send us pictures of what you build, because you could build a pizza oven out of this stuff. You can build a bench. You can build a rocket mass heater to heat your house and keep your butt warm. You can build a whole house, a dog house, in case you get sent to it. There's all sorts of things you can do with mud, and if you're doing something cool with mud, we want to see it at Uncle Mud on Facebook or Mother Earth News Fair.
Yeah, Mother Earth News. We have a Facebook page, and you can go ahead and send pictures there as well. So
we look forward to seeing what you do.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Russell Mullen,
Uncle Mud.
And hopefully we'll see you guys again soon.